There are a lot of ways to kill a show. The most common is canceling the show before the writers intended it to be over, usually without letting them know beforehand. Sometimes a show gets canned even earlier, shut down mid-season, and left without anything remotely resembling a conclusion. There are even quieter deaths, where the show just loses so much of its audience it may as well have been cancelled entirely, or what I like to call the mutation route. Which is when a show goes in a direction so absolutely terrible, it retroactively makes the whole series basically a waste of your time. There are a lot more ways to end a series unsatisfactorily than even the ones that have been actively used. Some shows, like Obituary, get a single pilot uploaded on YouTube and are never picked up by a major network, leaving them to languish in obscurity via webcomic when they should be building massive audiences and helping people grow and learn. Some shows just don't make enough money, or get absorbed by other companies.
And some shows people just never hear about. Some books never get picked up off the shelves, or even written in the first place. The amount of media that was never even put to page far outstretches the amount we get to see struggle and die. Like the number of DNA suppliers that give way to only one that makes it to the egg, only for that resulting life to emerge stillborn. Creating art can be a painful experience because of how many times what you make just dies in your arms. Which means it's a miracle when something like that threatens to happen, and then something else takes place. I'm Jordan Samansky, though you might know me better as the furiously bisexual guy. Let's talk about how the Owl House cheated death.
You love me when I'm down, aim your weapon, make a sound, and you can't say bye when it's one-on-one. You love me when I'm down, aim your weapon, make a sound, you can't say bye when it's one-on-one. Life without you, life without you. Who can make it out alive? Life without you. Who can make it out alive? Who can make it out
In case you aren't aware, The Owl House was an immensely LGBTQIA+ positive show that aired on Disney Channel from January 2020 to April 2023. It was intended to run for 3 seasons before Disney cancelled the third, threatening to leave the show on a cliffhanger ending that would never be resolved.
Thankfully, the show was allowed to finish up with the 21st episode of Season 2,
And 3 40-minute specials to cover the most important parts of what would have been Season 3. This is a collective 140 minutes meant to make up for the loss of 400.
Needless to say, the community was up in arms about this, crying out that Disney was full of homophobes for trashing the only queer show on its platform. Then we got the explanation that Disney wanted to air its narrative shows on Disney Plus because they better fit a streaming platform than a cable one, which is why episodic shows like Amphibia were allowed to continue. Also listed was the fact that the show skewed towards an older audience, which Disney Channel did not want. And look, we all know what happened with Kim Possible and what is still happening with My Little Pony, I get it. But I find it incredibly hard to believe that the money-hungry bastards that run Disney would give a fuck. Dana may have been the one to give us the older audience explanation, but that doesn't make it true. She could have been lied to, or signed an NDA and been told to give an excuse, or just come up with an answer to satisfy her audience. The degree to which Gravity Falls was censored didn't come out until years after the show ended. Who knows what happened behind closed doors with the Owl House's development? I don't have proof that the show was cut short because the characters were gay, but no one's given me proof that it wasn't either. Because here's the thing, if the problem really was that the show was better binged than watched sporadically, and or that the show was being viewed by people who were older than the intended audience, the solution would lie in just combining those two problems. It wouldn't be to cancel the show, it would be to move the show to Disney Plus. That way the older audiences who have jobs and wallets with which to buy streaming platforms would do exactly that to continue watching the show. And that would have worked. I've hated Disney since they killed Treasure Planet. Watch Spreadsword's video on that for more info. But if they had given Season 3 of The Owl House its due, I wouldn't have just forgiven them. I would have bought Disney Plus. Instead, we got a few half-assed excuses fed to and or through the showrunner and many allusions to things that could have been. Or at least, that's what I thought. That's what kept me from watching the show for many months after it finished. I didn't want another obituary, another show to leave me wishing there had been more, staring at the hole it left in my chest. But this was the show that gave me the most successful video on my channel, a video that got people asking for more Owl House content. And while I didn't have a lot to say on the show back then, I definitely do now. To quote Mark Hamill when people asked if he was going to be part of the third Star Wars trilogy, I mean, I kinda have to. But more importantly,
This team
put their all into this show from beginning to end. It wouldn't be fair not to watch the ending just because I was afraid it wouldn't meet my expectations. So I watched it. And I was right. It didn't match my expectations at all. It blew them out of the water.
The show already had so many amazing moments throughout the first 2 seasons, and the last episode still beat them out. Luz and Amity got so many good moments in these final episodes. King and the Collector's whole plotline was fantastic. Even the side characters got character development. Basha had a whole episode where she struggled with the things she's done and the person she's been. But she doesn't change significantly in the last few seconds, she just stops running away from her problems. Matt Tholomuel doesn't stop being smug, he just walks the same game he talks.
These might seem like small details, but the reason it matters is that it shows how well the writers understand personal growth. We all have core character traits that aren't unchangeable because of reasons, they're unchangeable because we don't want to change them. We see them as positives, even if others don't like them.
Matt's prideful and boastful, and that motivates him to be good enough at what he does that he feels worthy of the pride. Basha's wrathful and afraid, constantly. She's terrified of losing social status, and that's easy to manipulate. But in the end, it's also what gets her to realize that what she's really wanted was people who cared about her, and that those people had been around her the entire time. None of this is outwardly stated, and that's a good thing. It feels more natural that these two wouldn't give long speeches about their change because from their perspectives, they haven't. They're both still proud of who they are, and Basha's got a little shame added on.
Pride is not the opposite of shame, but its source.
I bring this up because I remember when characters in cartoons were expected to give you the moral of the story. Steadily, that faded from being a blatant end-of-show segment to being slid into the end of an episode more seamlessly. But no matter how seamless you get with it, that's still jarring to see in what's usually a show made for audience entertainment.
I'm always grateful for a show that has something to say, but cartoons have a history of being heavy-handed with it. They're aimed more at kids, but the assumption that kids won't get the lesson just because they're young always felt kind of insulting to me. My niece and nephew know how to port forward their Minecraft servers at ages 12 and 15. I don't know how to do that at age 26.
This is the kind of teaching tool I see a lot of cartoons using, but few do it so effectively as the Owl House. It shows kids that they can change without changing who they are. You don't need to get rid of the parts you like, just adapt them to your situation. If you want to be an animator, that doesn't have to be for cartoons. You can animate character models for video games, or make CGI for films, or make any number of things move that usually don't. What I'm describing is the same concept distilled into 2 characters in a 40-minute episode. It's pretty cool. And nobody's changed more than Camilla. I remember watching the episode where she made Luz promise to stay in the human realm when she got back, and thinking she was being really judgmental and insensitive. Even when I was told to think about things from her perspective as a mom whose daughter ran away, I still couldn't. Parenting is a difficult concept for me to grasp. I've never understood how some parents can feel like they have a right to decide things for their child after the kid is clearly knowledgeable enough to make their own decisions. I also can't quite grasp the idea that a parent could not know if their child is ready for that yet. I'm at the point where I can recognize my inability to understand these things, but that doesn't make actually understanding them any easier. What I do understand is a parent supporting their child in whatever they want to do, whether it's in line with their initial vision or not. And I am marveled by the strength of a person who's resolved to do this. Supporting someone no matter the decision they've made can be an immensely tall order. So seeing Camilla risk life and limb to help Luz achieve her goals is awe-inspiring. And you can tell she's the same mom she's always been. The only thing that's changed is how she views Luz. She's gone from viewing their collective weirdness as the thing that holds them back to seeing it for what it is, that which pushes them forward. She's not meant for the Boiling Isles, but she gets that Luz is. And anything that's meant to be part of her daughter's life is something she wants to know about. She's exactly the mom we all deserve. I do wish we'd had more opportunities to see it, though. Basha and Matt's changes are easily hand-waved by it being a few months since we last saw them, but Luz and the gang have seen Camilla every day. We didn't get to see them grow closer to her. The most we got were some introductions and a montage. And it's a good montage. All their human realm outfits are fantastic, but it's not what we were supposed to get. And we barely got to know V at all. Like, cool, they know how to use human stuff. They've got a thing for the part-time worker. That's great, I love that. But it just feels like we're being shown the crumbs that were left over after Disney demolished the cake right in front of our eyes. Especially this friendship between King and the Collector. These two are weirdly endearing with each other. It's so cool to see King acting like a big brother would. This could have been a relationship we got to see built up over the course of weeks and months. We didn't get to see any kind of friendship or more between Steve and Lilith. We didn't get to see the kids struggle to learn the human world or any number of wonderfully cute dates between Luz and Amity. There is no conversation that can be had about this finale without touching on the things it isn't. The parts of the show we never got to see. Now let me tell you why that's a good thing.
My favorite kind of fanfiction is the story after variety, or the between seasons ones that actually show us slice of life bits we only hear about in the show. What I love even more is thinking about what those moments are like on my own. I've spent hours imagining what Steven's road trip after the end of Future is like. I've eaten up the fan comics featuring Dipper and Pacifica's theoretical romance, and I have adored every one of the same comics drawn by fans representing the Owl House characters in their own after-show lives. Every show has loose ends. Every show leaves more to be desired for someone, which means every show inspires someone to fill in those gaps, to write the stories they wish they could have watched and heard. I scratched that itch using tabletop RPGs, and it's made some of my favorite campaigns. But there's a lot more to this than just the fans' feelings. The shorter runtime actually changed the show as a whole, and not all of those changes were negative. Around the time the cancellation was announced, I saw a lot of people online say that the show felt rushed, like the plot was moving way too fast. And even though that's obviously what was happening, they kinda had to rush the show if they were gonna touch all the plot points they wanted, it didn't feel that way to me.
I was a bit late to hearing that the show was denied a third season, so I got to see some of these rushed episodes thinking they were well within the show's projected runtime. This meant that seeing Luz hit with Philip's betrayal, getting the reveal that Hunter's a Grimwalker, the many twists the show had to throw in the latter half of season 2 felt novel. Like they were just a new way of doing things that was working. This show was pacing itself more dramatically than any other TV program I'd seen, even Gravity Falls. The pace was not overall faster or slower, but it accelerated at a higher rate at points that were very difficult to expect, and then slowed down again just as you thought everything was going to fall apart. The start of this finale was like that for me, long after I already knew of the show's fate. I was expecting the writers to take us back to the Boiling Isles as fast as possible, because there was so much left to do there. Then they spent the first 40-minute short entirely in the human realm. Yes, there were montages. There had to be. And those montages were good enough to make me wish I could have seen the more detailed scenes they alluded to. I wanted to see every image from the kid's scrapbook as a fully animated scene, which shows how good this team is. I've said it before, I'll say it again. No one beats this team in terms of the clock. Every second counts. Every frame matters. If we don't have the time, make the most of what time we do have. If we don't have the money to do that, then put the money we have where it matters. That kind of care and attention to detail doesn't come out of a team that's bored with a project, and it doesn't come out of a team that thinks it has all the time in the world. It comes from a group of people desperate to spread the message that they fell in love with, determined to finish a story that they had to fight to make as long as it is. It comes from sheer force of will and effort, and there are few things in this world I find more impressive than that. Art is the result of our ideal image coming into conflict with the reality of the canvas. In this instance, the ideal image was a third season, complete with all the best parts of what the writers intended. The ideal was a line of producers who cared about making the best show possible and thereby receiving payment worthy of that creation. The ideal was exactly what Dana Terrace wanted this show to be. The reality is 3 40-minute episodes. The reality is a corporation that cares more about pleasing its investors than art. The reality is a team of writers, artists, and animators who are not the showrunner and can never be her. As well as the fact that the show's market is kids, the show's platform is cable, and the country in which the show is being made is the US. All of these are limitations, and they keep the ideal from being reached. And in a lot of ways that sucks, but think about it for a second.
How many things have you made? You specifically, the person watching this video. How many of them are finished, and how many of those finished things turned out exactly the way you wanted them to? You know the answer. 0. No task you ever undertook went exactly the way you wanted it to from beginning to end. That's not a failure on your part, that's by design. The world is unfair, and it's going to make things harder for you. And that's a good thing, because imagine if you had all the time in the world to make whatever you wanted possible. Would you even get started on any of your projects? Let's say that you do. How often would you work on them? How much progress would you make without any deadlines, without a schedule, without a routine, without planning whatsoever? I've tried working that way and it's exhausting. You spend every second of the time you're working trying to make the end result perfect. And when it gets too frustrating or anxiety-inducing or you start to feel bored, you just stop. You call it taking a break, but at least in my case, it was closer to running away.
Restrictions are necessary to foster progress. Too many restrictions can hinder progress just as much as too few. I'm certain The Owl House would have been a fantastic show with a full 3rd season, and it would have been different from every other show, and it would have had a lot of wonderful things in it. But it wouldn't be exactly what Dana imagined when she had first pitched it. It wouldn't be what the writers imagined as they worked on it, or the artists or animators. In the best possible scenario, the ideal still would not be reached. The ideal is not the goal. The goal is to get it finished. And that's what they did. This isn't Obituary, which, as a cartoon, never even got off the ground. I'm also still struggling with that one. That would have been my favorite show if it got made. Kids need to be ready to lose their loved ones, because it could happen at any time. I'm just glad The Owl House wasn't afraid to talk about that prospect, along with everything else the show's got into. We might not have gotten the episode about Luz's dad that we did if the show had longer to run. And I'm sure the episode where they did talk about it in that theoretical what if would have been just as good, but it wouldn't have been the same. Hunter learning he's a Grimwalker wouldn't have been the same. Luz getting tricked by Bellows wouldn't have been the same. Luz and Amity's big kiss might have been the same, but it might not have. This is not to say that change is bad. Quite the opposite, actually. The show we should have gotten would have had human realm shenanigans, a burgeoning Hexside society, playtime with the Collector, and a slow build to the return of Bellows. It would have had romantic tension with the best couples in not just this show, but most shows, having all their cute moments together. It would have had mysteries to solve, traumas to unpack, and time to do it all with. And it's okay to be sad that we didn't get that. And it's almost an obligation to be angry with Disney for taking it away from us. But if that is an obligation, then so is being grateful to this team and those who worked with them to create what we did get. It's worth appreciating the show's fast pace and brutal punches for what they are, the smooth-as-butter animations the finale presented us with, and these excellent renditions of the characters as adults. We got 3 last 40-minute episodes that rounded out a lot of character arcs and gave a satisfying ending to the show. More than satisfying, a fantastic ending. Every major character got some kind of major resolution. Everyone changed a little at a time into the best they could be. We got to meet King's dad, see Rain fight off Bellows, and even saw fantastic images like this. Willow had her trauma reawakened and had to break through it with the help of Gus and Hunter. Hunter lost his talisman and had to go through every stage of grief that entails. King finally got the opportunity to teach someone else the way he was taught, with compassion and care, and Luz finally reached a stage of personal growth that allowed her the understanding she so desperately desired. I am actually gonna take a second to talk about this one because it's huge. Luz has been struggling to figure out what she really wants from life ever since the Talisman episode came up. She has an existential crisis over this. She thought all she wanted was to be a witch, but now that she effectively is one, she can't decide what kind she wants to be, who she wants to be. She doesn't even understand herself, so of course she doesn't recognize that understanding is what she's looking for. The fact that it's identifying with Camilla that gives her said understanding is just... it's so beautiful. Luz has been feeling so much pressure and fear in regards to what her mother thinks of her that she can't even think about what she wants for herself. This moment is her breaking free of those chains, recognizing that it's okay to be who she is, that she's not hurting anyone by doing that she's allowed to live her own life. Also, String Bean is fantastic, the perfect talisman for Luz. I love this little rapscallion, look at him go!
I could gush about this show for hours, and I probably will every time it comes up in conversation. That isn't what you do to a show that's dead. I don't like talking about Obituary, it's too painful, but I am never going to stop talking about the Owl House. It's a part of me now, of everyone that loved it. Because the people who made it didn't waste time lamenting its cancellation. They spent time, everywhere they could, to make what was left of it the best it could be. How did the Owl House cheat death? By being exactly what it wanted to be, right up until the end. By making the biggest impact it possibly could, so that the social crater left behind would remain for years to come. That's why I'm talking about it a year later. I don't care if I missed the algorithm on this. The show deserves the recognition. I'm thinking about making this a show that I binge every Pride Month, and I've surprised myself with sequel videos before, so you guys may see more Owl House content in the future? That's a serious maybe, but there's a lot more to learn from this show. About writing, about animation, about life. And I think it's all worth unpacking, whether by me or by someone else. Which reminds me, there are a lot of awesome channels that are or were entirely dedicated to the Owl House, so if June gets your hex brain going as much as it does mine, I highly recommend all of them. I'll have a list going in the description, and I would appreciate any recommendations in the comments below. While you're at it, you can leave a like if you enjoyed watching, and subscribe if you want to see any more of what I do. If you love this video or any other videos that I make enough to actually pay me to keep making more of them, there's a link to my Patreon down in the description as well. Subscribing to my Patreon will allow you to join wonderful people such as Eliath Goliath, Callison, and Billy Bob Joe, who have all pledged at $10 a month on my Patreon for at least a month or more. Thank you guys so much. You are helping immensely to support me right now. I really appreciate it. As far as other things, I mean, if you want to watch me play Pathfinder, you can follow my Twitch. If you want to read my posts about snails, you can follow me on X. Links to all of those are in the description as well. Take it easy, happy Pride Month, and I'll see y'all later. Peace.